So now we're going to have a really quick look at what the consumption function looks like on a 45-degree line graph. Now, I'm not going to talk about the significance of this 45-degree line yet. That'll become really important in later podcasts. Today, we're just going to focus on the consumption function on a graph. Now, the two axes we'll have are aggregate expenditure. And as we know, aggregate expenditure are things like consumption, investment, government spending, and net exports. Consider these to be the injections into our economy or the spending in our economy. And along the x-axis, we have income, which is Y. Now, it's going to be a bit of a tricky thing because usually we use Y to talk about this axis here. But in this scenario, income, which is denoted by Y, sits on the x-axis. Here's our national income. Here's our aggregate expenditure. Now, this purple line here, that's our consumption function, which we know to be A equals to autonomous expenditure plus the marginal propensity to consume. Marginal propensity to consume is dependent on income, therefore that's induced expenditure. So that's what we've got here. That's our C line there. Now, just by looking at it, it's actually very obvious to tell what our autonomous expenditure is. Remembering that autonomous expenditure is when our income's equal to zero and we have to spend anyway. Maybe it's coming from our savings, maybe we're borrowing it from a friend, it doesn't matter. Autonomous expenditure when income is zero. So we have a look here where our consumption function cuts the y-axis and we find that at spending 300, our income is equivalent to zero. So our autonomous expenditure in this scenario is 300. Now, the marginal propensity to consume is the change in income and its resulting change in consumption. So really, the marginal propensity to consume is actually the slope of this line. Now, you'll most likely not have to do this yourselves, but just so that you're aware, we can actually find the marginal propensity to consume just by looking at this line a little bit closer. So if I look at this line a little closer, I can choose just 2 points. And I'm going to choose these 2 points. Point 1 there and point 2 there. And I'm choosing these points because they intersect nicely at different points on our graph. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to find out the marginal propensity to consume just by looking at this line. So the marginal propensity to consume, as we should know, is the change in consumption divided by our change in income. So let's take these two different points. At this first point, our consumption or spending is 300 and our income is 0. At this second point here, our consumption is now 600, or our spending, I should say, is 600, and the income is also 600. So let's take the change in consumption. Well, the change in 300 and 600 is 300. And the change between 0 and 600 is 600. If we plug this into our calculator, 3 over 6 will give us a marginal propensity to consume of 0.5. So for every dollar we earn, we're going to spend, for every additional dollar we earn, we're going to spend an additional 50 cents. So the marginal propensity to consume of this line is 0.5, and that's the slope of the line, and that's dependent on income, Y. So that's just a little skill you probably won't have to use yourselves, but it's a bit more insight into what's happening here with our consumption function. We have our autonomous expenditure, and then we also have the marginal propensity to consume, which makes up this slope of the line. And that is the consumption function on a graph.